Fabian Zetterlund had a breakout season last year. What could his next contract look like?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Western Conference Tuesdays on the Locked On NHL channel. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. If you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch this on YouTube as well. And today we're going to talk about our good friend Fabian Zetterlund, friend of the show, Fabian Zetterlund, and kind of look at what type of contract he could demand next season. So we'll look at some comparable contracts, look at his projected production for this year, and try to kind of find a number that I think would fit for the Sharks and fit for Zetterlund. So before we get to all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. These sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Fabian Zetterlund, entering the last year of his very, very, very team-friendly deal. So Zetterlund has 1 year left at $1.45 million AAV. So remember when Sharks acquired Zetterlund, played terrible, right? Mike Greer gave him a 2-year deal at $1.45 million AAV. Kind of as a nice little kind of prove it deal. Zetterlund went out and had his breakout season last year, right? We'll kind of dig in that here a little bit more, but and now he's going into the last year of his deal. So just as a reminder, he would still be an RFA after this season. So the Sharks will own his rights, and he'll have a qualifying offer of $1.5 million. So basically, that is like how much he would expect to get paid. That would be way undervalued for Zetterlund, especially if he does what we think we're going to do, what we think he's going to do. And this would 1,000% go to arbitration. If the Sharks offered him $1.5 million, he could point to his production and say, like, I'm better than a $1.5 million player. So we're going to, on today's episode, try to figure out what is a fair value deal for Fabian Zetterlund, who I think should be a long-term piece to these Sharks as they're kind of putting together this core. So let's look at Zetterlund's last year, and then we'll kind of look at his projections and stuff. So last year, Fabian Zetterlund played all 82 games, breakout season, 24 goals, 20 assists, 204 shots on goal, averaged 18.51 average time on ice. Corsi for 42.94%. So when Zetterlund was on the ice, these Sharks were out or shot. They attempted almost 43% of the shots. Goals for 41.71. So again, when Zetterlund was on the ice, the Sharks had basically 42% of the goals. So big things to keep in mind there is when looking at contracts, kind of the big numbers are, of course, production, right? Goals, assists, points, like those are big numbers. Also, your average time on ice. Those are kind of the numbers that agents will point to is, my dude plays a lot, he scores a lot, etc. You should pay him a lot. Some of the Corsi stuff I just wanted to put on there just as like they don't really, that can be used for some arguments. But for the Sharks, 2023, 2024 Sharks, right? We all lived that. We all watched that. We know what type of team that was. So I think they would be willing to kind of throw that out and say, look, despite this, how bad this team was, look at what my guy produced. So what are production or projections, I think, for Zetterlund is kind of the next big question. Like what what should we, or hold on before we do that, looking at his fancy sets, I forgot I grabbed these too. So he played over first line minutes last season, 48th percentile player, 71st percentile offense, 10th percentile defense. So played a ton, even strength. Played first, line minutes on the power play and was playing a fair amount of shorthanded minutes on the penalty kill. So something to just keep that in mind here. So his even strength defense was not super great, but again, look at the 2023-2024 Sharks. I think you can kind of you can look aside that. So looking at his projections, and these are from ESPN, from their fantasy. I know it's from their fantasy, but it gives you I think a solid projection of production from Zetterlund and kind of make the case for this. So projecting Zetterlund to play 79 games, score 28 goals with 27 assists with 234 shots on goal, which I think are very, very fair projections, right? We think the team is going to be more competitive with more talent, right? With Eklund in year 2, Celebrini, Smith, Tyler Toffoli, like those are, like that's legitimate NHL talent. You have Wenberg, you have more depth down the center. Mikael Granlund's coming back. This team, I think, is going to be a more competitive team night in, night out. And while there is a good chance that Zetterlund might lose some playing time because of additions of Will Smith and Tyler Toffoli and Macklemore Celebrini, I think he can be more efficient. Okay. And he's still going to be playing top 6 minutes. Like I don't see, I really don't see a world where Zetterlund's not playing top 6 minutes because of the style of play he does. And I think he is, I think he earned a lot of rope last year. I know it's a new coaching staff, but Ryan Warsofsky was there. He knows what Zetterlund is. And Zetterlund is a good player, right? Like he's a good player. So, those projections put Zetterlund at 55 points this year would be a bump up from what we saw from last year. So 44 points last year, 55 points the projected this year. So we'll just say if he's in that kind of 55 to 60 points, which I think are very realistic projections for Fabian Zetterlund, scoring on the power play, I think you'll probably see the assists go up with more talent around him. I think we saw that shot of his is very lethal shot. So you would be looking at basically 2 seasons combined with the Sharks where, playing probably close to every game, hopefully, knock on wood, and 100 points of production in 2 seasons on one season, which was a historically bad season for the Sharks. And then you would follow it up with a season, which again, nobody's expecting the Sharks to kind of make waves this year, but they should be a more competitive, like I said, more competitive team night in, night out, and should be more fun. And they're going to have their growing pains when you have 2 teenagers on the ice every night. But I still think Zetterlund is going to benefit from the increase in talent round. And he's still, realistically, going into the season, he's probably your second or third best forward or winger, right? You'd probably give it to Tyler Toffoli right now, especially with that. He's a walking 25 to 30 goals scorer, and he's done it for longer. Then you would argue between Zetterlund and Eklund. So he's at worst your second or third, and by the end of the season, he'll probably still be your third best winger. So, he is going to be a big part of this season, of this team, and what they're going to do going forward. And again, another thing too is Fabian Zetterlund. He's 20, so he turns 25 at the end of the month. So still kind of like hitting his prime. He's had his breakout season. And I think there's still another level for him to kind of go. So next we'll look at some comparable contracts kind of based on production, and kind of try to figure out how much Fabian Zetterlund should make. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't a search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. So, join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show can get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, so what are some comparable contracts? And I have 3 contracts, and they all kind of have their holes, and one of them I think is much more comparable, but we still want to kind of try to figure out what a comparable contract for the Sharks and for Fabian Zetterlund would look like. So the first player I want to pull up is Eeli Tolvanen of the Seattle Kraken. 2017 draft class, the same draft as Fabian Zetterlund, first round pick. So he just signed a 2-year deal with the Seattle Kraken that's at $3.475 million. So Tolvanen last year had 81 games, scored 16 goals, 25 assists, 153 shots on goal, 1539 average time on ice. Keep that in mind. Corsi for 50.68, goals for 43.75%. Tolvanen, though, I think he's more defensively responsible player than Fabian Zetterlund. But I think Zetterlund does a lot of different things. So Tolvanen last year at even strength kind of played between second and first line minutes. It's just like Fabian Zetterlund got first minute power play, but doesn't play penalty kill. He only got a handful of penalty kill minutes last year. Remember, Fabian Zetterlund played like 60 penalty kill minutes last year. Eeli Tolvanen played like 8. So Zetterlund's playing more minutes per night, and is also playing shorthanded minutes. So Tolvanen, like I said, his defensive stats are much better, kind of playing that between that first and second line pairing minutes. 14th percentile player overall, 7th percentile offensively, but 70th percentile defensively. And this offseason, like I said, signed a 2-year deal at $3.75 million. So this one makes a lot of sense because of their age range, same draft, right? And you can say, and even the production's somewhat close. So Tolvanen, 41 points last year in 81 games, 44 points for Fabian Zetterlund. And then even going back, so Tolvanen has played much more. He's up to 6 years in the NHL compared to Fabian Zetterlund, who's played 3 full seasons, kind of got a taste of it at the age of 22 before kind of becoming a full-time player for the Sharks. But last year for Zetterlund, he's at 44 points. Tolvanen, who's, like I said, been a little bit more, played much more games, but hasn't really had this last year was kind of the big jump for him point wise. So he had 41 points last year. The season before, split between Nashville and Seattle, he had 31 points, and then he was kind of in the 20-point range. So pretty similar trajectories for both players. I know, again, Zetterlund a little bit behind years wise, just because of took a little bit longer developing, but you can kind of see the projection and I think the Zetterlund projection is kind of going a little bit up quicker, just because of the way he's kind of producing now and the home he's found. If he's turns into a 50 or 60 point player this season, he can easily point to and say, look, my dude scored 100 points in the past 2 seasons. And I think his contract should be more than Eeli Tolvanen contract. So makes a lot of sense there. So The next guy I want to compare, and again, these two players are not they're not comparable because of the styles of players there, and that's Alexis Lafreniere, the first overall pick from the 2020 draft. So again, Lafreniere is a much better player than Fabian Zetterlund, but if you look at the production, which we're going to do right now, you can kind of see a similar. You kind of looks pretty similar, to be honest. So, like say Lafreniere again, first overall pick 2020. He has 1 year left at his $2.325 million AAV. So he's going into a contract season. This last year for the Rangers, he has 82 games, 28 goals, 29 assists, 217 shots on goal. Average 17-16 average time on ice. Corsi for 55.51, goals for 52.67. So production-wise, again, pretty similar, way more 57 points this year, this last season with the Rangers. So more production than Fabian Zetterlund, but this could be what Zetterlund looks like this year, right? Those numbers sound very similar to what Fabian Zetterlund's projected production will look like. So, and then looking at kind of the player Lafreniere, again, much better player. First overall, or kind of way past first pairing minutes, 65th percentile player, 80th percentile offensively, 7th percentile defensively. Doesn't play as much power play as you would expect, and you hope for the Rangers' sake that he starts to kind of crack that power play lineup. I know that power play lineup is hard to crack, but still, doesn't play as much power play and plays like no shorthanded time. So much better offensively. But Zetterlund, I think, is a more well-rounded player. Also helps out on the penalty kill. But Lafreniere is getting most of his production even strength. So some differences there. But Lafreniere is also, like I said, he's getting expected to get a new contract there. So if the Rangers sign him sometime this season, right? We see it, especially maybe going to the trade deadline. You re-sign him or re-sign him before, he could be a contract that you point to and say, if he gets X amount over X years, okay, here's where he slots. And then Fabian Zetterlund maybe slots a little bit below that type of deal. Or you could look in if Zetterlund's like, hey, I don't want to sign a long-term deal. Let's look at potentially a 1-year deal. You could look at his Lafreniere's current contract. Again, that's a 1 year at $2.325 million, which would be a little bit of an increase for Zetterlund. But you could say like, hey, I think Zetterlund, I can play. If my production is pretty close to that, but I also play penalty kill minutes, maybe I'm up at like 1 year, $2.5 million, and that could be a closer type of deals. If Zetterlund maybe wants to kind of go 1 more year and then try to sign a long-term deal, or for Zetterlund potentially go to when does he become an he's an RFA next year as well, but could be looking at if he's trying to kind of maximize his value, maybe signing another 1-year deal and then trying to sign a long-term contract with the Sharks kind of going forward. So that's 2, I think, comparable contracts. And again, I think Zetterlund's a more offensively skilled player than Tolvanen, and I think he's, again, can play special teams a little bit more and adds more value special teams. And Alexis Lafreniere is a much better player than Fabian Zetterlund, but you can see the production at least are similar to what Zetterlund is kind of produced and what he's expected to produce this year. So finally, we'll look at Joel Farabee and why I think he is the contract that you should look to for the Sharks. And if you're Zetterlund, look to him as a potential contract. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. Something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com to start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right. Joel Farabee. And this is the contract where I think makes the most sense because I think these players are super similar. So Farabee, 2018 first round pick. That is one difference. So he's a little bit 1 year younger and also a first round pick. He is 2 years into his deal so he signed a 6-year deal at $5 million AAV. So he's got 2 year, or he's 2 year done with 2 years. So 4 years left going into this season of that contract. Games last year, 82 games, 22 goals, 28 assists, 182 shots on goal, 1611 average time on ice, Corsi for 5104, goals for 47.12%. So production very similar to maybe not as many shots on goal, not as much average time on ice. And looking at Joel Farabee, his evolving hockey card, played first line minutes, 54th percentile player. Remember, Zetterlund was, I think, 48th percentile player, so very close there. Offensively, 65th percentile, 33 percentile defense. Zetterlund was a 71 percentile offense, 10 percentile defense. But again, we kind of last year's Sharks. But yeah, first line minutes, even strength, playing on the top power play minutes, and shorthanded. This is the difference here. Farabee played like 4 minutes shorthand last year, while Fabian Zetterlund plays shorthanded minutes and I think does it pretty well. So I think this is the comp that you look at and say, okay, if you were the Sharks, if you want to give Zetterlund maybe a 4 year, so he's turning 25, so he's, by the time this season's over, he'll be 26 for the start of his next contract. Okay. If you want to offer him a 4-year deal at $5 million a year, that'll get him through basically to his age 30 season. So you get him through his prime at $5 million a season. And I think that's kind of where you start with the Farabee contract, because Joel Farabee, the past couple seasons, pretty similar production. So he signed this deal right after his ELC, and this was a little bit of the Flyers kind of banking on him to continue his growth and development, and he has done that. So after his ELC, he signed this contract in the past 2 seasons. So he played 22-23. He had 82 games, 15 goals, 24 assists for 39 points. So if you kind of compare the first full season with the Sharks, for Zetterlund, he had a little bit more production, playing more, and he averaged 17:01 average time on ice. So a little bit more production, also played a little bit more. This last season, he played 82 games. He had 22 goals, 28 assists, 50 points. So that's kind of where we're projecting Fabian Zetterlund to be. This year's average time on ice go down to 16:11. So I think that's a fair deal, is offering Zetterlund $5 million a piece, $5 million a year. And if you want to go 4 or 5 years, I feel like that's the right range for the Sharks. And you have to also as weird as it sounds, you do have to kind of keep in mind, like, you're going to have big contracts eventually coming, right? Sharks, their cap projections right now, like next season, they're projected to have about $48 million in cap, at least the cap hit. And if the cap goes up to $92 million, which is, I think, the last kind of projection I saw for it, that's still like $45 million in cap space you're going to have to kind of fill. And they'll have 13 of 23, and yes, they'll start to kind of be a little bit more aggressive with their cap space. But like going into next year, like Mikael Granlund will come off the books, Luke Kunin will come off the books, Klim Kostin will be a UFA, so you can kind of figure out he'll be an RFA, excuse me, so you can kind of figure out what you want to do with him. You'll have Carl Grundstrom still on. You'll have Zetterlund. Like, you have a lot of guys who really you don't have to pay. Like, so I know eventually you're going to have Will Smith. You're going to have William Eklund. You're going to have Macklin Celebrini, but those are 3 years away. From Eklund's 2 years away. The other guys are 3 years away. So I think for the Sharks, and if you believe that Zetterlund can be a really solid piece and continue to be maybe not a top 4 guy, but a middle, really, really solid middle 6 winger, I think that's a really fair deal for both parties. I would go a 5x5 and say, look, maybe your production isn't as good as some of these other guys, but like, we think you're going to be really solid for us, and I still think that kind of fits with the hierarchy of the forwards, right? Tyler Toffoli, yes, he's older, but he's proven longer. He's getting paid $6 million for the next 4 seasons, right? Eklund is going to be a big contract, at least we hope, when he kind of comes up for his deal in 2 seasons. And you expect when he gets that his contract will jump to the top. So of the wingers. So if it's for the foreseeable future, if Eklund becomes the highest winger, Tyler Toffoli is your second winger. I think having Fabian Zetterlund as your third highest paid winger, especially while your center depth is super cheap, I think that's kind of where he slots in. So I would probably go maybe if you want to do 4 years at 5.5, or if you want to do 5 years at $5 million, somewhere in that range. And I think it's going to start with a 5, to be honest. I think that is a fair price for Fabian Zetterlund and what he does. So don't be surprised when Fabian Zetterlund if he gets a long-term contract and he continues to produce the way he produces, don't be surprised if that's kind of what he's looking at getting here. And especially with how cheap the Sharks contracts are, like, you can easily pay Fabian Zetterlund. And then by the time he's done, by the time that contract is done, he'll be in his early 30s. And you can replace them with some of your younger players who are coming through the system, either who you've drafted, who you've developed, who you've traded for. Or you can be aggressive in free agency to maybe try to replace him. So, but yeah, I think though Zetterlund should be a long-term Shark. He should get a medium to long term, I guess. I don't know what I would say. Medium term, I think, is at 4 to 5 year range, with 6, 7, 8 being kind of long term deals. But I think that is a perfect contract for Zetterlund. Would be something like that. And if you do want to sign him for 7 years, 7 or 8 years, 7 or 8 years is a long time for me. But I think with his style of play, he's been very, very healthy, knock on wood, so far in his short career. You could talk me to a 7-year deal, but I still think a 5x5 feels pretty right to me. So that's gonna be it for me today. We'll be back tomorrow. I know we're gonna do a roster reset here. I haven't done one kind of after free agency. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow. Maybe we'll do that early next week. We got some more interviews we got getting lined up here, so plenty of good stuff here still coming in here at Locked On Sharks, as we're still cranking out 5 episodes a week, at least through the end of July. Then we'll probably cut back. Then we'll be cutting back down to 3 until I think the start of training camp. So, but yeah, that's gonna be it for me today. Make sure you guys are following wherever you get podcasts, and of course, you can watch on YouTube as